You've been introducing the term osmosis lately. Can you elaborate on how you see it working on an energetic level, which I think is what you've been talking about?
Well, first of all, I actually think that the chakras and the channels are osmotic pathways.
What does that mean, though?
What does that mean? Well, it means that, energy condensed in the form of sensory stimulation, is absorbed into the body and transforms the entire nervous system. So the effect is either to stimulate increase flow or to suppress flow. The suppression of flow means the osmotic processes are going into the shell, into the superficial shell, and inhibiting flow. And, that becomes a basis for disease. It becomes the basis for, unwellness on every level. And it is the basis for death. You think about plants. Plants, the fundamental physiological process by which plants exist and are nourished is osmosis. Even all the cells in our body and all the bacteria and the virus, their fundamental metabolic process is osmosis. They are absorbing nutrients through the cellular membrane that defines them as an individual, and they are also passing off metabolic byproducts through that same membrane. So this energetic mechanism that we have, chakras and channels, is taking its internalizing experience and transforming us either for an increased flow or a decreased flow. And in most people, this happens in a very unbalanced way, meaning, because it is our intention to get a job, to have a career, to make money, to, be acknowledged in the world as a respectable character, we behave in certain fashions that stimulate flow in that area. But at the same time, because that's our intention, so all the other parts of us, of which there are many, become suppressed. I mean, a perfect example is this guy, Rob Portman, who just got kicked out of the White House. Clearly a smart guy, academically, brought up in a wealthy family, attended Harvard undergrad, was a Rhodes Scholar, has worked in government for a long time, has been very highly thought of, seems very capable, and ends up, in the White House as the top bureaucrat. And is then thrown out because it turns out he beats the shit out of his wives. Well, here's a guy who clearly, in the process of, becoming accomplished and getting to the top of the, administrative bureaucracy in the government, has suppressed many other significant parts of himself, and in fact has become a very unhealthy character. So our intention, whatever that intention is, will very often stimulate flow in that area, but be suppressed in many other areas. So, spiritually, we are attempting to, take down the shell, stimulate the total osmotic process, and from that, and service is, a fundamental part of this osmotic process. From that, we awaken and unfold and realize, our cosmic nature. So, in which case, being, respected in an environment where, people value money, or being respected in an environment where people, admire your gun collection, being respected in an environment where, your ability to diminish, different ethnicities and genders, is not something any healthy human being would ever aspire to. The process of dissolving the shell begins with Shaktipat. People usually talk about Shaktipat as if it's a momentary thing. It's an event that happens and it has some effect, and it's either a big effect or a middle effect or a small effect. But for me, the experience of Shaktipat is an ongoing experience. That awakening that I experienced in my, direct contact with Rudy is an awakening which is still alive and unfolding at this very moment. In the same way that a seed created by a tree or a plant, falls to the ground and it is essentially inert until the right circumstances come together, and that seed, the shell of that seed, is penetrated by water and energy and nourishment, and begins a change within the seed that awakens, these osmotic processes in many dimensions of that seed, until it becomes something completely different than it was. It becomes first a sprout, then it becomes a plant, and it might become a giant tree. It'll become whatever it is. And it will live for the time that it exists, due to osmotic processes from the ground that it's planted in and the sun that it's exposed to and the various climatary changes that affect that sun and that ground. And, all of this is the seed internalizing its external experience. The seed is absorbing into itself its external experience and being transformed. It's not accumulating data. There's no lesson involved. The seed is transformed. And it is transformed and retransformed and retransformed. There is a flow with a transformative flow within the seed that reveals its fullest potential. So that, now like the poplar tree in our backyard is it's maybe the biggest poplar tree in the world, tulip poplar. The gardener from the Japanese garden said something like that. It's certainly the biggest tulip poplar on the West Coast. It's over 100 years old. It has thousands of tulips on it every year and produces millions of seeds. This tree has had the opportunity to become fully itself. That's all based on osmotic process. So, with that metaphor, I will say that a guru, a teacher, is a gardener. His company is the garden. His creative energy, the experience of his presence, which is also the experience of his teacher's presence and his teacher's presence and his teacher's presence, is the environment which we are internalizing. And this internalization reveals the richness of our own creative capacity. It reveals the richness of our capacity to feel and to imagine. And you look at this room, or say, look at this chair. As an example of what I'm saying, this was a bunch of wood and a bunch of stuff at one point. And somebody, had the idea in their head, oh, I want to make a chair. And they looked around and they saw this wood and they saw this, cotton, and they saw these things, and they put it all together. Here it's the chair. Human beings have transformed their environment from within themselves. I mean, like, the buildings that we make, the everything that we have is really, there's no model for it in the world initially, it's something that arose within us. It came out of our capacity to feel and to imagine. So, living in the environment of a guru, we are internalizing that experience of the guru and that energy and that nourishment and that love and compassion and service that the guru is giving to us. And that is awakening all of our, creative processes, our imagination, our intuition, our ability to feel, our skill with language, our perception of color and smell and taste. Everything becomes intensified, and as this happens, our life becomes extremely enriched. And we can begin to see in the dirt on the ground and the sticks, on the road, and in our total environment, we are seeing material that is available for us to use in the transformation of our own life into something sacred. So, osmosis. That's what we're doing here. And all of the intellectual processes that people engage in, are also osmosis, but if it only reaches your mind, it ends up as a part of your shell. The energy has to not only penetrate your mind and dissolve and continuously transform, I should say, the cognitive structures that your brain is creating. It has to go through there and touch your heart and reform all these cognitive structures based on its experience of your own deepest inner self. And it also has to go further than that, still to touch your soul, and begin to awaken in you the awareness of yourself in the total environment as, a flower petal floating on the wind in this world. So, osmotic process is, Kundalini Yoga is osmotic process. Service is, and which is our initial topic, seva and devotion are all about osmosis. Contact, alignment, and flow is osmotic process. We are taking in the world, taking in the universe and bringing it into ourselves. That all these atoms, all these electrons and protons and neutrons and gluons and muons and quarks that were created in stars trillions of light years from here, that have come together as us, so that all of these particles can find their proper place in the universe and be at peace. That's what Seva is about.